This is the 2021 edition of SPE-1000. We've gone through and made comparisons to the 2013 version of SPE-1000 and marked up this PDF standard with comments and notes as to what the differences are. Some of the differences are very slight and others are much more involved. Here, in the introductory section, in Section 0, there are some minor changes made for clarifying text. You'll find that there's been quite a number of instances where text has been changed and clarified. There's a few sections here where they have redefined who is approving electrical products or that it's been approved in accordance with a particular standard. Section 2. We've highlighted quite a number of items here. There are some new references and other changes where we've only highlighted the individual version or year number of that particular standard. Quite a bit here has been updated and re-referenced for the most recent edition of the standard that was published. Now, there is a further clarification on the definition of approved, and there is some text that has been replaced here for that. There is a new, rather important definition. They define complex installations or multiple interconnected systems, which would be power-driven devices or assemblies designed to work together, including interconnected wiring that may receive power from more than one source. We'll come back to this later, because there are some additional labeling requirements when labeling complex systems. In the 2013 version of SPE-1000, there were a number of normative sections that were in the annexes. Those normative sections were moved into the body of Section 4. This compliance with standards section was moved from the old Annex A1. There's a sentence here that was added. There was no previous skid requirement in the old annexes. This section was moved from Annex A2, and there is a paragraph here that is new. This sentence was moved from Annex A6. Now, one consequence of these new sections being moved from the annexes into Section 4 was that some section numbers will be bumped by one digit. Again, more clarifying text where they add a reference to a clause. And also, throughout the document, you'll find where I've highlighted one number where this is a result of a paragraph being bumped, and some of it may be references to standards, in which case that little bit of highlighted text is the version number. This section was rewritten and retitled. It is now wall or ceiling mounted equipment. This section here, 428, was rewritten and expanded into 3 sub-paragraphs. You'll note that I've only highlighted what has changed. And I've made a note here that 629 is the rain test. This is a new section regarding submersible enclosures. And this is also a new section here regarding service equipment. Further down, there is another new section which is regarding marking for maintenance requirements or service requirements. This section is the same, except that they provided examples of standards that would cover those requirements. Again, an updated table number, because as it turns out, they added a table and numbers got shifted. A piece of text here, a bit of clarification. Previously this said a terminal or connection box. Now, it just simply says a connection box. The implication is that terminals need to be inside connection boxes. There's a new note here regarding interconnecting wiring. Down here, this section was renumbered and the title removed. It used to be a section on bushings. It was a simple renumbering in favor of the new Section 413, which was moved from the Annex. And there are several sections here that were all taken and moved here from the Annex. Again here we have an updated reference, and there is an added piece of text in this one, 419.1, where there is an exception that is allowed by the ruling in the electrical code. This page contains some updated reference numbers, and this has additional text specifying the clause number for the temperature test. Again, further clarification and updated reference numbers. This section was rewritten, presumably for a new standard. It was previously referring to CSA 22.2 number 1. Now they're referring to a standard for fixed capacitors for use in electronic equipment. There are some added paragraphs for section 425.5 regarding the temperature test. So this bears some discussion and a little reading here. Where a regulated control device for the heater is used without a high temperature limit device, the temperature test described in clause 6.2.3 shall be conducted with the control device bypassed to verify that no extreme temperatures are present that could result in a fire hazard or insulation breakdown. Which basically means that, in this case, if you're going to be doing a temperature test and there's a high temperature limit device, the temperature limit device needs to be bypassed for the purposes of the test. There's a paragraph here that says a programmable logic controller, regulating control device, or any other programmable electronic control device shall not be considered as a high temperature limit device. These devices, when used to control the temperature, will require the temperature test described in clause 6.2.3, which means that for the purposes of the previous paragraph, a high-limit programmable controller is not considered a temperature-limiting device. The last sentence says, a separate high-temperature limit, when installed, shall be verified to function correctly by testing. What this very clearly means is that it's expected that as part of temperature testing that a high temperature is tested. Practically speaking, you would have to ask your customer's permission before operating equipment to the point where the high temperature switch is tripped. So there are some further table reference numbers updated here. Further updated references. There's a clarification text referring specifically to a section number. There is some clarifying text that's been inserted in this paragraph. Here is a new section specifically for high voltage transformers. Generally speaking, all that it's really saying is that you need to do whatever the specifically related standard says as far as testing and evaluation goes. The previous section on additional requirements for wind turbines has largely been removed and replaced with this single sentence that basically tells you you have to refer to CSA 22.2 number 272. There are some changes made to what used to be called utility interconnected inverters. This section has been renamed interactive inverters. And similar to the windmill section, the bulk of this section has been removed and/or rewritten, making references to CSA 22.2 number 107.1. Here, they've changed the name again. It used to be utility interconnected and now it says interactive. There has been an expansion here on the range of numbers. They've added a 25- and a 50-. There are several new sections on this page. There is a section for the additional requirements for equipment incorporating lasers, and it is referring specifically to CSA E60825-1. That is a performance and usage standard for industrial lasers. That standard talks about the labeling requirements and the classification and use of lasers. There's another section here, additional requirements for non-medical X-ray. And it does not refer to another standard, but here are the requirements for dealing with non-medical X-ray equipment. There's another section here regarding non-medical cosmetic and hygiene products. And again, it's not making reference to another CSA standard, so the requirements are listed. There's two more brief sections here, additional requirements for non-residential air cleaners that intentionally produce ozone. You'll note that in Ontario, such equipment is not allowed to be field evaluated for residential applications. There's another new section here, additional requirements for energy storage systems. It simply refers to CAN UL 9540. That brings us to the marking section. And in the marking section, there is this, which is further clarifying text and updated references in numerous locations. This new requirement here is in regards to arc flash labeling. This new labeling requirement here is in regards to the previous new paragraph in Section 4 regarding servicing. Here's some further updated references. There is a section removed, additional requirements for wind turbines. A number of new sections added, one here which bears a bit more reading. Additional requirements for complex installations, multiple interconnected systems. The key thing here is that when you're reviewing complex installations, this is specifying the requirements of a master label and gives the details here. You have to have a title that says master or system label. You have to have a unique identifier of each subsystem listed, your field evaluation for the overall system, and a statement that identifies whether the interconnected wiring is evaluated as part of a complex installation. One thing to keep in mind is the scope of the wiring you're evaluating. Any wiring that is in or on the building is not field evaluated under SPE-1000, but rather it is to be evaluated by the authority having jurisdiction. So when evaluating complex systems, you need to pay attention to where is the interconnected wiring, how is that wiring run, is it a brief run between multiple systems that are within the scope of the evaluation, or does that wiring go to the wall or other parts of the building which require evaluation from the authority having jurisdiction. There's additional requirements for markings of X-ray systems. Now, Section 6, the testing section, there is actually one new paragraph here under General. Environmental conditions for the equipment evaluated in the field only need to be considered where a test failure has occurred. Seems clear enough. The dielectric withstand section has a bump in the number, and some sections have been rearranged and rewritten for clarification. Base requirements for dielectric testing here is the same. There is one thing to note here, that no tests are specified for voltages equal to or under 30 volts. This is an additional piece of clarifying text. However, the paragraph simply says for equipment rated in excess of 30 volts, so regardless of the clarifying text, it's not required. There's a new paragraph here which basically describes requirements for double insulated products. These section numbers are bumped. There's a note that was removed here, and this section number was bumped for the flame test, and there's some added text here that would further clarify the flame test requirements. The strain relief section, the number was bumped. This section was rewritten and a new Table 4 was added as well, which resulted in table numbers being bumped. There is a piece of clarifying text and an OR was added here for the temperature tests, simply referring to other product standards. There are multiple updated references on this page. There's a statement removed here that clarifies this paragraph. Multiple updated references and some clarification and added qualifiers referring to particular product standards. This test here, wall or ceiling mounting, used to be called the supporting device test. This section was rewritten and an additional table was added regarding the forces applied. There's a qualification added for 1 hour for the rain test. Here we have Table 4 inserted for the strain relief test. There's an added highlight here for an additional reference back to Section 4 for this table. Table 13, I've got some highlighted text here with some new references to Section 4.3.1, and also this table has been merged with Table 14 and 15. The yellow highlighted numbers here are what was copied in. Again, further references updated. and this table here was rotated with no apparent numerical changes. Some further references change, and Table 18 was added. This would be the correction factors for multiple conductor groupings. This would be very similar to what is in the Canadian Electrical Code. There was a spelling error that was corrected. The diagram for the intrinsic safety barriers was slightly redrawn for clarification, and the legend under the diagram expanded with a note added. So here I've made a note. The original Annex A was merged into Section 4 as normative sections, which also means that the section numbers have been bumped downwards. There are a number of highlights here for new references. And also, the original Annex E was removed. Personally, I find this to be a useful reference, so I pasted a comment back in to give me back the reference. And these are all the changes in the new 2021 version of SPE-1000. For all your inspection needs, visit attestasafety.com.